And thank you all.
Wow.
Good timing.
Talk about AI. We would, it's all you, Elizabeth.
All right, let me get this microphone going. All right, good morning, everyone. Let me add my welcome to everybody on Zoom and welcome to everybody in the room. And of course, a special welcome to all of our speakers this morning. We're excited about this panel, and we have 3 panelists this morning that I will be introducing. And each will have about 15 minutes to speak this morning on their particular topic. And we want to leave a lot of time for questions and answers at the end, as we always do. As Peggy mentioned, this program is on artificial intelligence, the uses and abuses. So let me dive into the brief introductions, and then we'll get right into the program this morning. With us in person is Assemblywoman Gail Pellerin. Most of you know her. She is represented District 28 that covers most of Santa Cruz County and some of Santa Clara County. Assemblywoman Gail Pellerin will be speaking to us about a bill that she authored, Assembly Bill 2839. It's a bill designed to protect, a bill titled Protecting Democracy Against Election Disinformation and Deep Fakes. As most of you know, Assemblywoman Gail Pellerin is a former county elections clerk for Santa Cruz County. She's a true expert on election security and operations, and we're very happy to have you here this morning. Thank you so much. She will be followed by a second speaker, Benjamin Breen, who is an associate professor at University of California, Santa Cruz. He's with us via Zoom this morning. Benjamin has a particular interest in the long-term impacts of technological changes, and he lectures often on artificial intelligence. He'll be sharing with us how artificial intelligence opens up new possibilities in science, medicine, and daily life, but also poses risks that we all want to be observant of and that should not be ignored. Welcome to you this morning. And following Benjamin will be Roya Pakzad, who's also with us via Zoom. She is the founder and director of Taraz, a nonprofit organization working at the intersection of digital technologies and human rights. Roya is also the 2023-24 Practitioner Data and Democracy Fellow at the Karsh Institute of Democracy and the School of Data Science at the University of Virginia, an affiliate scholar at UC Berkeley's Citrus Policy Lab. Previously, she served as a research associate and project leader in technology and human rights at Stanford University's Global Digital Policy Incubator. We're really looking forward to her insights as well this morning. So again, speakers, thank you so much for being with us. And Assemblywoman Gail, if you would begin, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. I think Elizabeth and I have the same cozy sweater.
I know,
today.
I noticed that. I think I needed something warm.
I know, it's like a blanket, yes. So anyway, welcome. Thanks for everyone for being here today. I'm honored to be here with Benjamin and Roya on this panel. And AI is moving fast, as you all know. And we're needing to put up those essential guardrails. And I remember during the 2016 elections where we were seeing how there was a lot of misinformation and disinformation being spread quickly and rapidly using the internet. And most notably, recently we had robocalls impersonating President Biden. It was actually done by a magician. I thought that was kind of funny. That was Biden saying and doing something, talking about the election in a negative way, and it looked just like him. I mean, the technology has gotten so good. They could take an image of somebody, a voice of somebody, mannerisms, facial expressions, and duplicate it. And the tools are all readily available. So that is extremely concerning to me. And we are involved in our first AI influenced election ever. And we're moving fast. So I have a bill. I'm working with a group called Cited, which is the California Initiative for Technology and Democracy. It's a nonpartisan group made up of stakeholders and experts who are working on several pieces of legislation to tighten up and set up guardrails so we're not seeing and hearing things that aren't true, and have disclosure for AI when it's being used. And so we've got, actually there's 32 states now that have proposed legislation this year targeting election-related deepfakes, underscoring its bipartisan urgency. And then Governor Newsom did an executive order in September 2023 that sets a precedent for ethical, transparent AI usage, asserting California's global leadership stance. So we really can't wait for Congress to take action on this. It's not happening fast enough. We're looking a lot to the EU because they are being very active in this area and putting up the guardrails that are necessary. And and I've seen it all. I mean, it's not new trying to change an election outcome by putting out lies, misinformation. I mean, there was a time way back in the day when people were doing the door hangers and opposition folks who put up door hangers telling you the wrong place to go vote. That's causing chaos in the election and people being concerned about what is true and what is accurate. And when people get frustrated in trying to go and cast their ballot, a lot of times they just give up and say, forget it, I'm not going to vote at all. And I've seen how when you water those seeds of distrust in our integrity and accuracy of our election system, people respond by not voting. And we're seeing our voting trends going down, down, and down. So the one bill I have is AB 2839, and I'm working collectively with Cited on this. And also I am now the chair of the Assembly Elections Committee in Sacramento. So that's a real powerful role for me to have and to be able to set the course of the AI as it relates to elections. And this bill basically aims to curb anything that is digitally created and materially deceptive 120 days before an election and 60 days after. Basically, my bill bans it. It says you cannot do it. And then we set up a processing code for an expedited hearing should somebody say, hey, I received a robocall, I saw a video on the internet, or I received this piece of mail that is false and not correct, and to basically allow them to go to court and then fight it back and say this is not allowed. And I think this is also important to raise awareness. We've always said to trust, but verify. And I think it's the other way around now. We need to verify before we trust it. And there's lots of different websites available for people to verify information they're seeing or hearing, or to call your local elections official or the Secretary of State's office and ask them whether this is true or not. And then I'm working with two other authors. We have a 3-bill package. So Senator Padilla has SB 1228 and Mark Berman has AB 2655. I can't read these numbers very well. And they focus on enhancing transparency and curbing the spread of viral disinformation. And they're also working with the social media platforms. And that's not as easy as you can imagine. And a lot of these social media platforms have gotten rid of their checks and balances around artificially created materials that are being posted on their platforms. So we're in a lot of discussions. And the thing about AI is like there's some really good uses of this. I mean, it's something that really can help teachers and health providers and and government as well. But it's when it takes the dark turn, when it becomes something that people are using to spread lies and deceit. We have just got to cut it down. We have got to say it is not allowed and it is banned. And it's so important for these bills to raise the awareness of folks out there who are reading and seeing these things as well. So we have over a dozen bills right now in the state legislature aimed to balance AI's advantages against their potential harms. And we're emphasizing oversight, ethical norms, consumer rights, AI regulation in public dealings as well. So, as far as, and when we were at our press conference, they were showing us a video of somebody saying, just putting out information, talking, and it looked so real, and it wasn't, it was fake. And they also showed a photo of the Pentagon getting bombed, and that photo went out on social media. And on that day, the stock market plunged as a result of that just a simple photo going viral. So these bad actors are impacting us not only in our election space, in our communities, our workspace, our economy. I mean, it's really just gotten out of control. And I'm sure you all heard about the guy that was in a Zoom meeting with his colleagues, he was thinking, and they're telling him to send $25 million to this location, and then he goes and does it, and it was all fake. It looked real to him, and the quality of these, videos is just unbelievable. If you haven't seen it, you've got to check it out because it's scary. And parents are also getting robocalls and things sounding like their kids asking for money, and so. We're in a new world. We are in a whole new world now. And so we have to have our critical minds on. We have to be reviewing and checking and double checking everything we're seeing, hearing, and popping up on our platforms that we're using. So, there's things that we can look for, different oddities as far as lip syncing or facial expressions and voice mismatches. We need to rely more on reputable news sources and trust social media shares with skepticism. We cannot just see something and say, oh, that must be true. And then do your fact checking. So everyone needs to take a role of being responsible in checking what they are seeing and hearing. And it's, like I said, this is our first big election, and it is the most critical election in our lifetimes. And it is very concerning to me that these tools are so easily available. And there's so many people out there who have hate in their hearts and want to cause chaos in our elections. And so I think the way to fight back is that we need to get out there and vote. We need to register. We need to make sure all of our friends are registered and encourage people to cast that ballot. We've done so much to remove barriers to voting, where everyone gets a ballot mailed to them, the postage is paid, you can drop it in a drop box, and our power is in that ballot. So it is absolutely essential that you ignore a lot of the noise that you might be seeing and hearing during this election cycle, and focus on what is real and in your mailbox, and that's from a trusted source like your local elections official or Secretary of State's office. So I don't know where I am on time. Am I good?
I think we're good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
5 minutes to spare.
Well done. Gail, thank you so much. We're going to move on now to Professor Breen, who's going to speak with us for about 15 minutes, and then we'll.
No, we're gonna do questions for.
Oh, you want to do questions for Gail first? Oh, I forgot. I'm sorry, everyone. Time for questions for Gail.
And let me bring the mic over. to
Of
people.
course.
Thank you.
Oh,
You and I are that. Yeah.
Gail, thank you for the presentation. Really scary, the potential, but my question is, how are these things running up against the First Amendment?
So, that is definitely a concern, and we're being very careful to carve and draft this legislation so it does not violate First Amendment rights, which is why we put the time frame in 120 days before an election and 60 days after. That's when these materially deceptive materials will be banned. So that gets us around that issue.
Hi, Gail. I want to know, how are you going to enforce this? Assuming it passes, how are you? Because you can't enforce stuff on the internet because it's coming from everywhere.
Right. No, it's definitely not as easy. And that's why it's in combination with the other two bills by Senator Padilla and Congressmember Berman, because they have legislation that goes, that works with the platforms for them to identify when something is artificially created. And so it's a whole package of bills to do that. But in the end, I think what we're trying to do is really raise the awareness that this is real and it looks real, but it's a lot of times it's fake, and it's information that's just causing you to question the election process or to make a decision about voting or not voting based on what you're seeing in these deep fake videos and information coming out. So, but we do have an expedited court process should somebody want to pursue it and say, hey, I saw this online, I want to go to court. So we have an expedited court process for that to be heard.
Yeah, Chuck Rickman here. So as in the regular news on evening, whatever, you might get beeped out if you say the wrong word, right? I don't know if the technology is available to the internet, but there's a lag time issue. So during that lag time, something spreads. It could be extensive spreading, and that's where the damage is. So I don't know if your bill or your associates deals with this.
It might be something more for the Berman and Padilla bill, because they deal more with the platforms. My bill simply bans anything that's artificially created and materially deceptive 120 days before an election and 60 days after. So we're just putting that standard out there that this is not allowed. But the other bills do disclosure. They work with the social media platforms as well. So we could check and see what's in there.
Okay, you said AI could be used for some good things. Could you? Can you give me 2 examples and be very, very specific on these 2 items that are supposed to be fabulous?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a very simple thing we've all used is like red eye reduction in a photograph or changing lighting in a photograph. I mean, that's basically artificial intelligence. Chat GPT, people will use often to help, write a letter or write a resume. It's a useful tool if you're applying for a job, and you can put in the job requirements and then put in your resume and say, highlight where my skills, training, and knowledge intersects with this job. So then it helps you in writing your letter and going after that position. So I don't want to say it's evil in every way, that AI is a tool. I know that it's being used by doctors and determining how to treat a patient. So there's just a lot of different ways it can be useful. But certainly in the election space, if it's going to be something that's deceptive and putting out false information, it is not going to be allowed.
What kind of responses are getting from your colleagues in the legislature? Are people agreeing this is a problem? Are you getting civil rights, civil liberties responses that are negative? Or are you going to be successful with this bill? What's it going to take?
I certainly hope so. The 10 bills, the 10 bills I sent the governor last year all got signed. So I hope I can keep that record going. Its first hearing is Wednesday. And of course, it's in my committee. I'm the chair of the committee. I have a recommendation of due pass. We got some amendments I think we're doing with it. But so far I'm hearing bipartisan support on the bill as well. And, we're hoping to get our 3-bill package out into the governor and hopefully signed into law. And the bill does have an urgency in it, so it would impact the November 2024 election.
Hello, I have 3 related questions. The first is, how are you going to raise awareness of the individuals in the community of this entire thing, so that people will indeed contact those who do something about it? The second question is, how do we know if something is real if it looks so fake? How can we, I don't mean us, but how can the general public who is viewing things know enough to contact appropriate parties? And then the third thing is, again, the question of enforcement. It's one thing to ban something, it's another thing to enforce it. And enforcement is, expedited enforcement is the key element here, because things happen so fast, as you pointed out. What is expedited? And going to court seems, as we've observed with Mr. Trump, a very slow process, or it can be. And so those are my 3 questions: awareness, enforcement, and how do we know if it's real or not?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Good questions. And I think when it comes to awareness, I am a huge proponent of changing the entire conversation around elections. I feel like the media all too often talks about, oh, turnout's going to be low, young people aren't voting. They're always focusing on the negative. And we can turn that conversation around and talk about the positive, what your vote really means. The fact that when you vote, you protect your reproductive rights in the state of California. You are protecting your climate. And we're seeing the effects of people not voting, and where we're seeing states that are implementing, horrible anti-LGBTQ laws, restricting abortion access. So your vote matters, and I think we need to be delivering that message to people, that your vote matters, and it's not only your right, but it is your responsibility, and we expect people to vote. And now we're putting another layer on it. We expect you to think and verify what you're seeing, reading, and hearing. And yes, that's another layer of civic responsibility, but I think we need to continue to raise that awareness that be careful what you're seeing on your phone that's from sources that you don't know. And the fact is that they could have an elections official that looks just like our elections official, sounds just like our elections official, putting out a video that says, hey, you know what? The voting systems can be hacked and the results aren't going to be accurate. So, they could show this looking like it's real and it's not. So we have to start really pushing for that critical thinking for folks to stop and ask whether that is true. And then if they need to, call that elections official and say, hey, I saw this video of you. And is this correct? Did you say and do this? And they'll tell you no. Your next question, as far as enforcement, so in election law, there's a different provision on expediting election-related cases. They usually go within a few days. It's fast. And so I've been sued many, many times in my life. So, as the county clerk, so, not my own personal capacity, but it will, it goes very, very fast. So we can get those expedited through the court process. And then your third question was?
How can you tell them it's enforcement, marketing, so that people are really aware of things? Changing the conversation with the media is very important, but it seems to me that the media is negativity driven to get attention.
Yeah, that's why we need other voices.
Right.
Yeah, my dream is for Taylor Swift to be out there promoting voting and how important it is to register and vote and not believe everything you see and hear.
Yeah, thank you. We have time for one more question because the woman has to leave early. We'll go on to others.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I would like to see all these issues transferring to the computer to protect us. And it means when you look at cyber attacks, the company Oracle, they offer a software which automatically find out where the cyber attack is and also protect the software through AI algorithm in this basically encrypted languages. So I wonder whether you can look into that. Because I doubt that people take the time to verify and check it.
I mean, that's another area where we're looking at doing legislation and putting up those guardrails. And we also, there's a lot of foresight. I mean, California's been a leader in this area. In 2017, we created the Office of Cybersecurity in the Secretary of State's office. In 2019, Berman did a bill to require disclosure on AI generated materials. So California has really been a leader on this. So I'm sure that that's part of it.
Squeeze in one more question. Oh, right there.
I'm happy to meet you in person, but I remember when you were back getting our young people to vote. Way back. My question is, what do you see as futuristic in terms of legislation in California? We've got, for example, the 1,200 community colleges. We've got 116 meeting today. I choose to be here because I believe that it's legislation that would come from starting way, K through 12. And I know what I would share. What would you share as next steps for the elders in the room?
Sure, no, that's a good question. And I do have another bill on civic education in high school, and it complements Monique Lamone, Senator Lamone's bill on civic education in elementary schools. And as a county clerk, I really did a lot of work with our schools, and there's a lack of civic education. I would love to bring back the Civic Summit. I mean, we were talking about that the other day, that this body here, DWC, put on a civic summit for youth in our county. And, I just think we need to be doing more of those kinds of things. And so I'd love to see that come back. Yeah.
Thank you.
A little logistics here.
There you go. Thank you so much. We know that you're short on time this morning. We really appreciate you were able to stop in and speak with all of us here. And we wish you a lot of luck, and we're gonna be watching, and let us know how we can keep supporting you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. All right, thank you. We are now going to move on to our Zoom speakers. Thank you for bearing with us as we go through logistics this morning. All right, Professor Breen, thank you so much for being on with us this morning. We're really looking forward to hearing about your observations and studies and insights, and we will ask you to begin and then follow with some questions. Let me also mention, if you're on Zoom, please enter any questions you have into the chat. We'll be happy to also be sure that your questions are brought forth. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Just to check, can you hear me okay right now? All good, hopefully? Good. So I want to just start by thanking the DWC and the organizers and Gail Pellerin for that amazing talk. It was really interesting, and it gave me a lot to think about in my role as an educator at UC Santa Cruz. I also just want to explain why we're both together on the Zoom call. So Roy and I are married and the parents of 2 daughters, and we have a newborn. So we wanted to be there in person.
A newborn in the house, so thank you. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
So
We understand why you're on mute now.
yeah. And also because we couldn't be there in person because she hasn't
Oh,
gotten
he's
her
still on
first
mute.
dose yet.
It's not on here.
No, he's not. Hang on, we can't hear you yet for some reason. One moment, please.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I was on mute.
Might be on our end. Is it on our end?
Okay, can you hear us now?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Oh, we hear you. Yay.
Oh, I was just talking and I
Sorry
didn't.
about that. I
That's okay. I was saying that we wish we could be there in person,
think
but
there was a problem with our.
okay. Can you hear me okay now? Oops. Yeah, Zoom that you can hear, but in the room, can you hear me? Darn, really? That's frustrating. Um, that sucks. Can you hear now?
That's
Yeah.
good.
That was good. Yes, we can. Perfect.
That
Thank you.
works? Okay, sorry about that. I know that's annoying to be on Zoom. What I was saying, and I think the people on the Zoom call heard, but not in the room, is that Roy and I have a newborn daughter and a toddler, so that's why we can't be here in person. But we're very glad to be here virtually, and we also live in Santa Cruz, obviously. So if you are in the room and you see us around town, or if you'd like to just get in touch with either of us, we can give our contact info. And I'll just start. So I'm going to talk about 2 things. Oh, I don't think the people in the room heard me thanking the DWC, but thank you to the organizers. When I was on mute, I was saying that. So I'm a history professor at UC Santa Cruz, and I do study the history of technological change and the history of science. And I think that it gives us a really good insight into what we heard from Gail, like this idea of civil society being threatened by AI is very valid. I agree with that. And I'm glad that this work is being done. At the same time, I think it's good to have a historical perspective because it's not the first time that new technologies have posed a threat or, for that matter, an opportunity or new potentials. And so I'm actually going to talk largely positively about the use of AI in education for the rest of this talk. But just something that's came to my mind as I was thinking about the issue of misinformation in elections. Yeah. Are you able to hear me in the room? I just want to double check. Is it not working? Okay. Is there any way that we can confirm that you can hear us in the room? No, they can't hear us. Oh no. That's darn. Okay, darn. What do you think we should do? I don't think it's going to change. Are you not able to hear at all? I'm just wondering if people can confirm. Wow, darn.
That will cause that feedback.
We're working on
Is there an echo?
it. There is
Yeah.
a bit of an echo, yes.
Oh, darn. Okay. Oh, wait, I have an idea.
I think it's because it's.
Could be because your phone.
Does this help if I take off the audio?
Yes, it does.
Okay,
If you try speaking.
I'm gonna take off my audio and maybe that works now. If there's, unfortunately, that's hard for me to hear now because I don't have audio, but maybe if I wear AirPods. Oh, you don't have AirPods? Darn.
You can't hear it. You have to move it.
Is there any way to communicate via chat to let me know if you can hear me right now without an echo? Because otherwise I think that it would just be an echo because I have my audio on my computer.
Yeah, there we go.
That's
Now,
perfect.
good. Sorry, a little Bluetooth issue.
Yep,
We're good. We can hear you.
We're
now.
good now.
that's good though.
Did you in chat?
Yeah, otherwise I think it would just be echo.
Perfect. That's perfect.
We can hear you great.
We're
You
good
can hear me
now.
fine? Okay, sorry.
Check.
And just check in with me via the chat so that I can tell if you can still hear me. Okay, I'll just get going. I'm sorry about that. One of the things I wanted to just mention is that there's a long history of technology being threatening in this way, to the extent that Socrates, the philosopher, did not know how to read. And he actually attacked literacy in his writings precisely because he believed that it will produce forgetfulness. That's a direct quote. He thought that it would cause issues in young people and in education because people who could not read had better memories. And so he actually saw reading itself as a technology that posed problems in his society. And to his dying day, Socrates was opposed to the idea of reading. It was only his students who wrote down his works. And that kind of continues through the history of technology. We have a kind of a long record through the history of printing presses and onwards of specifically politics being influenced by technology in ways that are perceived quite negatively at the time. And then in later generations, we tend to forget about it. Obviously, as an educator, I think literacy is great, and I encourage literacy. It's worth keeping in mind that that was not always the case among very well-educated people. Likewise, with the printing press, Daniel Defoe, who's probably thought of mostly, if you've heard of Defoe, it's through the book Robinson Crusoe. He's thought of as a great writer today. In his time, he was thought of as a political propagandist and was actually quite negatively portrayed by many people because what he was actually doing, in addition to writing fiction, was impersonating people. He was writing election-related materials that were pretending to be real people, but were not. He was using fiction, in other words, as a political tool and basically doing the 18th century version of deepfakes. He was impersonating false people in order to sway political elections, you know? And so Defoe was very much of his time, but also at the same time speaks to our own time. And that the thing it tells me is that this is not new. And what Gail said about fact checking is the reoccurring sort of lesson of history. Learning how to fact check, learning your own independent ways of doing research are the best safeguard against misinformation, because misinformation is not new. The way that AI creates misinformation is new, but that's just a mode. It's not the fact itself. It's been an eternal factor in political life since at least the printing press. And I think the solution today is much the same as it was 300 years ago, which is, I'm a history professor, so of course I would say this, but history education, learning about fact checking and learning how to go to primary sources and learn the ways of constructing factual knowledge based on competing points of view is what I try to teach in the classroom. And I think it's probably the most effective safeguard against these kinds of AI-assisted misinformation and deepfakes that we've been hearing about. So the question about good things from AI, I'm going to basically speak about that for the rest of this, and I'll be short because of the technical difficulties. But one of the main things I just want to say is that if you haven't tried using LLMs, large language models, which are most famously ChatGPT, but there's others. Google has one called Gemini. They're extraordinarily helpful for individualized education. They're amazing for learning how to learn languages, for instance. So if you're trying to learn a language, just try talking to it. Try talking to ChatGPT. You can literally speak to it in the language. It will respond in the language that you choose. And you can just say, I want to use this as a language tutorial, and it will do that. Roya is from Iran, and I've been learning Farsi, and it really helps learning a different language. I can personally attest to that. Likewise, using it to augment education in a university classroom. Yeah, if you want it as like a personalized study assistant, it's actually quite helpful. And misinformation, I can say, is not really a problem if you're using it in that way. It's only if you're using it in a bad faith way that it actually becomes a major issue. So I guess the other thing I want to talk about is just the ways that I've been using it in my classroom at UCSC in the history department. And if anyone's interested in this, I wrote a blog post about it, a couple actually, and I have also been working with my colleagues at UCSC to think about ways of integrating this into other classes. The blog post I wrote is called Simulating History with ChatGPT. So if you Google that term, you can find it. And basically what I've been experimenting with is just that. The idea of thinking through historical events using AI as a kind of interactive tool to understand the different ways a historical event could have gone, or the different perspectives brought to bear on that event. It's incredibly powerful for that. It's really fascinating to plug into ChatGPT a set of historical sources and ask it to simulate or imagine what the scene was. So, for instance, the French Revolution. It will do an amazing job of reconstructing the different debates that were had between different groups in the French Revolution. And the cool thing is that you can actually give it the actual texts, the actual historical source. So this gets around the problem of misinformation because you're actually feeding it with the real primary sources. And it's kind of reproducing elements of them and then adding other things that are fictionalized, but which are actually quite historically authentic. And the thing I do with my students is I don't tell them this is real. I tell them this is fake. And precisely because it's fake, it's actually a really good training tool to learn how to fact check history itself and to get kind of a set of guardrails or almost a set of cautionary, kind of like having their guard up for the ways that these things operate in the real world. So looking for those telltale signatures where something seems right, but it's not quite right. And crucially, learning how to check the AI output against the historical source. So that's what I do with my assignments is I have students fact check the output of these simulations and then write papers about what the real historical source tells us and then what the AI told us. The main thing I get across, though, much like the Daniel Defoe example, is that historical sources themselves are not 100% transparent or accurate. In fact, they're very frequently highly inaccurate. Daniel Defoe being a great example. Robinson Crusoe is thought of as a novel today. He pretended that Robinson Crusoe was a real person. He purported to be actually Robinson Crusoe himself. And when it was published, people thought Robinson Crusoe was real. It's only later that we were like, oh, it's a fictional character. So that way of thinking of learning to be skeptical and learning to compare different sources and fact check is one that has been valuable for hundreds of years. But actually AI, I think, has the potential to encourage students and young people today to be more skeptical, not less, if we actually embrace the good elements of it, but remain aware of the negative parts. So I really want to avoid a monolithic view of AI in the ways we think about these tools, because they can be many, many things. They can be brilliant language teachers. They can be really helpful, as it was said, for students applying for jobs, students, people with disabilities. You know, my mother was hard of hearing, and she used to have to pay for a service that would transcribe audio when she spoke on the phone. Now AI does that. And there's many things that help disabled people specifically that I think are really valuable. So I think I will stop there again because technical difficulties sort of made it cut my time short a little bit, but happy to take questions. And I hope that came across as the audio was okay. And let me know via the chat if it wasn't. We can adjust. The final thing I'll say is just a plug for the UCSC history department. History is very underfunded right now. If anyone listening to this is interested in being involved, including, for instance, hosting internships for history majors at UCSC, or even just working with them in local civil society, let me know. You can reach me by email at bebreen@ucsc.edu, and I'd be happy to talk more that way or in the Q&A.
No, it's,
Great. We were able to hear you quite well. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, DWC, for organizing this event. Thank you to my fellow speakers. As mentioned, my name is Roya Paxad. I'm the founder and director of a small nonprofit organization here in Santa Cruz. It's called Taraz. We have been working on issues around internet freedom, online privacy, data rights, digital rights in general, and or the category of something that as an umbrella term, we use it as like a human rights and technology, intersection of human rights and technology. And for us, AI has not been a new thing. You know, we have been working since 2015, or at least me, my background is in electrical engineering. Then I moved to human rights studies in 2015, and since then we have been working on these issues. So AI has not been a new thing. AI has not been intimidating as it is today, because so many of these issues that we have been talking about AI, about misinformation, disinformation, accessibility, privacy issues, data rights, they already exist. And now with the AI, it has been more advanced. It has been more kind of mainstreamed, thanks to the media and to education system. People, they got to know more about these issues. But first, I want to say what AI is, because the topic that we are talking about AI, like, and the description of this event is about AI. So artificial intelligence is a computer system that try to perform a task that match human level intelligence, such as decision-making, learning, problem solving. And I want to give this description because I want to say, as good as we are as human in learning and decision-making and problem solving, AI is as good as that. So we, with all our flaws in decision-making and problem solving, we can expect that kind of issues and flaws from artificial intelligence, at least at the moment. And you might have heard the term machine learning, that it's a subset of AI, that it learns from a lot of data, historical data. Ben mentioned about large language models. They learn a lot from all the text that is available on the internet, and in any kinds of like text that is available, a lot of them. And then based on that, it predicts the next word that should come. For example, if you write, "It's a beautiful," and then it predicts, oh, usually it's the beautiful comes with it, "It's a beautiful day." So it's like a high prediction of the next word usually. So, and some of the examples that I can bring up, it's in your cell phone. Now you bring it up, there's so much AI in that, like Siri, it's assistant, voice assistant. Facial recognition technologies are used for unlock your phone, and or more advanced applications of AI is like self-driving cars. But my work specifically is about how these systems are used in the governments and how they can be abused. Ben mentioned about education, how it's beneficial in education. That's true for grading, for personalized learning, for providing material that it matches the student's performance and progress. It's one thing that it's very useful. In healthcare, as they mentioned, it's for predicting health disease outbreak. Or, for example, if we are on Kaiser insurance, when we go to Kaiser, they give us a consent form that, are you okay with your voice being recorded? Then that data will be used for analyzing and gaining insights about your health and about and it will be shared with the Kaiser system, and later probably, if it's not, it's privacy protected with the public health departments, and they figure out some of the insights in healthcare. And in criminal legal system, they try to understand what are some of the places that are hotspot for crimes, for example. And from there, they can dispatch police, or they can provide other kinds of policy intervention or services to reduce crime rates in that neighborhood, let's say. Or in migration adjudication system. For example, if someone file an asylum application and they want to realize, okay, if this person should be granted asylum, they try to use different systems, like lie detector, accent detector. They look at their social media platforms and try to see and gain some insights about like if this person actually requires some asylum. So people or in the governments, the way that these systems are used are portrayed as a very efficient system. You know, they reduce a backlog, for example, in migration. They provide help to police to find crimes, right? But my work in human rights is mainly about what are some of the way that these systems can be abused. And the very prominent example that I can bring up for you is in 2020, Santa Cruz City became the first city that they decided to ban predictive policing. So if we are talking about the benefit of AI in reducing crime, why did our city ban predictive policing? And the reason for that, it goes back to the definition that I provided about the AI and how AI is trained and has been created. Because if we use our historical data to train and to make AI or to build AI, and our historical data is biased against certain group of people or against, in this case, Ben brought up Farsi, which is my language versus English. If English is outweighed Farsi in the training data, the AI is going to be better in English. The AI is going to be better in the, for example, predictive policing, because our historical data has been biased against the neighborhoods that are mainly the neighborhood or zip codes that are lived by people of color. Then we know how biased police departments they have been, or in maybe 30 years ago, 50 years ago. Now they might have been better. But then they dispatch more police to the neighborhood that are neighborhood of people of color. And sometimes there is so much mistake in that because it has been trained on the data that has been discriminatory and has been biased. So Santa Cruz City decided to ban predictive policing because there was so much flaws and so much discriminatory work. And you might have experienced with your facial recognition technology, if you have darker skin, sometimes at the moment they fixed that because so many people, they talked a lot about the skin color and in facial recognition technologies. But 5 years ago, maybe the facial recognition technology on my phone was less effective and less accurate for my skin versus Ben's skin color. So people, technologists, civil society organization, prominently ACLU, if I bring up one example of civil society organization, they decided to talk with city councils members and say that please ban predictive policing and the use of facial recognition technology without having any oversight, without having any technologists auditing these systems to make sure that are not flawed, they don't have any issues, like that much issues or inaccuracy for different types of group of racial groups, gender groups, and nationalities, languages. So this bias is one of the issues that we have to be aware as citizens about the applications of AI in governments. The other issue is about privacy. You know, again, going back to the definition of AI and the use of data, the more data we use, the better these systems they become. And that invite technologies to gain more and more and more data from social media platforms, what are the activities you do, to your even walking pattern from the facial recognition technologies that are inside our cities, from the way you talk. At the moment we are talking on Zoom, and Zoom analyzes the way that I talk, and then they decide that, oh, this person has an accent, and it looks like this accent is for the part of Iranian kind of the like origin accent. And then the more data that it collects from me, and then they decide like, okay, now we can make our AI better if they want to say, okay, if they want to transcribe our meeting. So the more data that it gets, it becomes better. And that invites technologists, that invite AI developers to gain more and more access to our data. And coming from a country that government is not always a good actor, Iran, usually this data can be used for surveilling. So these are some of the issues that we say that, okay, if a company is going to work with the government for providing healthcare system, or in public education, there is a company that provide education tool. So what are the data that are collected from this company in order to provide this service? How can our government protect us from the abuse? Because at the end, these companies, they are private companies. They might use the data for that specific purpose, but they might also abuse that for other purposes. And also law enforcement, at some point, they might kind of get access to this data if there is not any kind of like a privacy protective safeguard. The other issue that we have been working at Taros a lot is about transparency and accountability. About a month ago, my sister got rejected from her visa for not in the United States, but in Canada. But nobody said what was the reason for that rejection. And one of the reasons for that is like in immigration and visa system, so many of adjudication and decision-making, it's just like it has been put on AI that sometimes it shows a red flag without any explanation that what is this red flag, why this person might overstay in a country or might be a threat to national security. So that the issue of accountability is lost when AI is integrated with the government work, because then you say that, okay, if this is a claim for public housing or any kind of social security claim that are processed through AI, and it has been rejected, why it has been rejected for this person but not that person. So there is not much kind of accountability, like who is responsible. Now, if the company is responsible for that issue, or if the government is responsible for that issue, what should be some of the checks and balances in place and oversight by human that goes into place in AI decision-making. I don't want to say that I am completely negative about the use of AI in government, and that's the whole purpose of our nonprofit, that I myself am technologist. I use these tools all the time. I believe in the benefit of them. But I do believe that as citizens, as civil society organizations, we have the responsibility to push our government to become more transparent about the use of these tools. We in California, we have California Public Records Act, that each one of us, we can reach out to our city and say that what are some of the AI tools that you use and in which department and why? Can you show us the contract with the company? Have you done any kind of auditing to make sure that this tool is not discriminatory and biased? What are the data that you share from citizen with that company if you are buying that tool? FOIA request, as part of my work with University of Virginia, I'm trying to understand how different federal departments are using AI and what companies are involved. Unfortunately, I filed more than 100 FOIA requests to gain access about the contracts. I got 0. Even though I provided a ward number, they said we couldn't find any records, or they referred me to other departments. So the issue is like, yes, we are talking about AI, and then we have all these tools, so we have to use them to push, to put pressure on our government to be more responsible about the use of them, about how they adopt that in for different settings. And please go through City Council members' agenda and see if there are some item that it's about technology, either by police or in any kinds of department, and try to voice your concern or say that, can you provide more information about how this tool works? Or ask the city staff members to bring up technologists to describe this to us, that how this system works, what are some of the flaws, what have been some of the auditing methods that went into place to make sure this tool works fine. And last but not least, our city does not have any kinds of oversight in terms of like advisory or committee, that it has any kinds of oversight on the use of data. Oakland and San Diego, they have privacy oversight committee. but our city, they don't have it. They banned predictive policing. The next step was based on our communication with city council member. The next step was to think about having a privacy committee or advisory body or surveillance advisory body that helps our city council members, our city staff members to understand, to bring some oversights from public of how these systems are used and bought from companies, but at the moment we don't have it. So we see it as a responsibility of us as a civil society organization in Santa Cruz to talk with our city staff members, city council members to see what is the progress, what kind of progress has made in bringing up that kind of like advisory and oversight to decision making. I want to end here, but I'm very much looking forward to your questions.
Thank you so much. That was excellent. We have questions in the back.
Hi, Ben and Roya, thank you so much for your presentation. I had a quick question, and I want to give you a little bit of context to it. I guess my question is that as an industry, do you see a partnership in between government and, say, the private sector being beneficial? Or do you think that they should be should there be a self-regulation aspect and then also a legislative attempt to kind of rein in the excesses of AI? And the example I want to give is, so I have a friend who works for an AI company, and they shall remain nameless. Basically, over a dinner conversation, and I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially, that you could use one of these AI tools, not necessarily to look up how to make a bomb, but you could do something like, hey, what chemicals or ingredients should I not have around my house to make a bomb? And the language model will respond with, you need to get rid of X, Y, and Z, essentially in a roundabout way, telling somebody how to make a bomb. And so the private sector is aware of these problems, and I think that there is a role to regulate from a policy angle. But I guess my question is, like, how do you see this? How do we move forward with all of these different problems? Essentially, like, is the legislative angle going to be good enough, or do we really need to have sort of like a private-public partnership with AI companies and people that their incentive is to make this marketable product, essentially, right? And to make money off of it in some way, shape, or form, and to push the science forward. But at the same time, how do we rein in the excesses there outside of government? Because it will almost certainly fall short, given that government is slow and policy deals with what's happening now. But this technology is moving so quickly. How effectively can we rein that? I know it's a big question, so just do your best there.
Question. Thank you so much for that question, because it's something that I think a lot about that, and I get engaged through my nonprofit. So just bring up an example. Recently, just like about 2 months ago, National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, they created a consortium of public, civil society organization, academic organization, and private sector in order to come together and develop kind of framework for responsible development and use of AI. So Tara's, our nonprofit, is also part of this consortium, and we are trying to provide kind of like the framework that is informed by human rights to take into account issues around privacy, freedom of expression, freedom of protest, and some of the ways that technologists themselves inside companies, they can have this self-regulation. I don't call it self-regulation, I call it education for technologists to know that when you use certain amount of data, when you collect certain amount of data, when you try to develop this system based on different features like such as gender and race, what are some of the safeguards that should be into place? And what are some of the red lines? And in our work specifically, we do a lot of work with private companies for conducting human rights impact assessment or auditing for their AI systems. And with that, we usually collaborate with engineers, with groups in the policy, in trust and safety departments of companies in order to be able to just like have some checklists to go through when they develop product. It's very much informed by the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. UN has its own framework that it's not mandatory, but it's very much like respected. In the US, less, because the US, we know that relationship with the US and UN has not always been great. But in Europe, the AI Act, for example, EU AI Act is very much informed by information about human rights or Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And there are kind of advocates in Europe that they say that we have to think about kind of like encourage companies to apply universal UN guiding principles on business and human rights in their own business activities and the products that they develop. So I am a believer of that the private companies, they can work with the governments because they have the most amount of insight about what they are building. Unfortunately, we have seen sometimes the contract. That's why I brought up about the public oversight and the fact that we can gain access to the contracts, because in contracts they put some confidentiality clauses for software, proprietary software, that then it stops public sector or like city staff members or in federal agencies to gain more access or information about the system. So if we have that kind of like understanding that, okay, how this public-private partnership should work, what are the stuff that it should goes in the contract to gain more insight about the system, then I am very hopeful about public-private partnership, and it should be done. We have to have this kinds of partnership. Otherwise, it's impossible for government to develop these systems. It's impossible to government to gain some insights and information about these systems.
Just one thing I'll add, the bomb making example. If we imagine going back to Santa Cruz in the year 1971, you could probably walk into an independent bookstore in early 70s Santa Cruz and buy a copy of the Anarchist Cookbook, or you could probably find someone who would distribute a copy of the Anarchist Cookbook, which, among other things, included instructions on how to make LSD and how to make bombs. So again, it's this history of technology. This is not a new thing. The printing press also allowed the dissemination of knowledge of how to make weapons, right? And that was one of the major reasons why people were opposed to mass literacy, actually. It was considered dangerous. To some extent, it was dangerous. The Anarchist Cookbook was a dangerous book, but it was a book that existed 50 years ago, right? It's not necessarily new that you can find ways of making a bomb. Also worth noting that you could have Googled it 2 years ago and found the same information probably. So I'm not necessarily persuaded that there's anything new in that example. However, I do think there's some scary stuff. The OpenAI actually has a paper about the red teaming process for ChatGPT, which Roy was a part of, where they hired a chemist, and it actually did a pretty good job of teaching it specifically which Chinese chemical factories to order constituents of a chemical weapon from. That surprised me. So there definitely are new things that are dangerous, but that it's worth mentioning was in the context of that being prevented. It was a precautionary step of testing the limits. So it's not just working with governments, but it's also working with nonprofits and people who are experts in the field who are aware of how to negotiate the limit of free speech versus dangerous knowledge.
Go ahead. Thank you. Another question?
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, great. So my question is sort of maybe a takeoff on the public partnership, public-private partnerships, but it's also more in terms of how information is input into the system. And I'm also wondering about how democratic that could be. So I understand that companies have a desire to put all the novels in, for whatever they're interested, or all the chemical formulas, or something like that. But in terms of being democratic, how much influence can individual people do, like their family history or something like that? So I just wanted to broaden that topic out. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So in California, we have a law, CCPA, California Consumer Privacy Act, that if you have noticed, you can request from companies to remove your data from their system. If sometimes on the website you go and you see "do not sell my data," if you scroll down, sometimes it's written "do not sell my data." And sometimes it works based on geolocation, that they understand that you're logging from California. So it's just like they have "do not sell my data." That it's very much, you can kind of like have some types of control on your own data. But it's how effective it is and how it is enforced. I can say that it's not perfect, of course, but it gives some kinds of protection to people from certain state, or in the context of Europe, the whole GDPR, that again, it's about protection of data, that it applies to all the European citizens, so that they have that kind of like protection. But personally, I am very much skeptical about legislations and laws that they put the responsibility on us as individuals. If we don't scroll down and don't see "do not sell my data," or if I am not informed enough to go into the company and say that delete all my data, or if I'm not technical savvy to go to my application and find a privacy setting and turn it off and do not give my data to the company, then the company is gonna have my data. So very much these types of safeguards that are in place, or laws, the way that the enforcement mechanism of that it works, it puts the responsibility on individual people, and how much technical literacy they have, how much understanding they have, in what kind of languages those kinds of information are provided. So I would say that yes, there are some safeguards that people, they can be involved and advocate for themselves or for their group of people. But it's very much in the US, at least it's very state-based. As Gail mentioned, California is in the forefront of protecting consumer privacy. And now about deepfakes and AI, but in general, in the US, we don't have that type of protection. And I'm not sure how the enforcement works. And just to mention about how effective these laws are, for example, deepfakes, Gail also mentioned that 32 states, they have been racing for having some legislation, having some law for protecting us from deepfakes, election-related deepfakes. But if you go back to 5 years ago, that deepfakes was not that much mainstream. The people who were affected by deepfakes, they were women who had abusive partner, previous like ex-partner, that they were trying to make nude pictures and images and videos of these women. Teenagers that they were bullied in a school, and they created these kinds of videos for them. So protection, even on the deepfakes, is very much on election. It's very much on like politicians. But when it comes to ordinary people, at the moment, we don't have that kind of like interest or any kind of law that protects us. So I do believe, yeah, that we have some, by law, if we pass any kinds of law, we gain some protection, but how it is enforced and who will be benefit from those laws, it's kind of, it's something that I am skeptical, or I see it as my responsibility to inform more people to use the law in their benefits.
Could I just add, it's funny because I feel like we're like the pessimistic and the optimistic take sitting next to each other, but the question was also just about the role of democracy, which I think is a really good one. And if you construe democratic very broadly, one thing it involves is the sense that having a mass public sphere is a good thing. Having the more people involved in political choices and decision-making, the better. Not populism, but still the sense of a public sphere. And one thing that hasn't really come up much, but me and Roy talk about all the time, because we're a bilingual household, and Roy has family members who don't speak English, is that this is amazing as a leveling device for non-English speakers. English is the global, sort of language. And if you don't have access to English language, you're cut out from so many choices and decision-making. It is amazing how good AI systems have gotten at instantaneous translation, to the extent that it's entirely possible that I could be giving this talk, or Roy could be, to a group of German speakers, and we don't speak German. it can immediately translate into another language. That's the current technology, and that's going to get better. So I actually think that's an amazing step in terms of democratizing global public discourse, that people who don't have access to, the ability to learn English or other languages, not just English, are now able to communicate across that linguistic barrier. To me, that's a major democratizing force that doesn't necessarily get talked about enough. I think it's a good thing. Yeah, or people with disabilities, exactly.
So in your comments today, Ben, and also in the book that you read to get ready for this meeting today, makes clear that the history of technology in the long arc, it's not a particularly happy in terms of government trying to regulate this or keep stuff under control. The technology tends to take off, and it's very, very difficult. I mean, the printing press comes along. A lot of people might have thought it was a bad idea, but it's not something that stopped. And if you look at social media, the problems with Facebook and its impact on young people in schools and those other kinds of issues, we've been pretty unsuccessful actually regulating them at all, despite a lot of concern about it, public hearings and this often Zuckerberg is dead in front of Congress, but I don't see the government actually successfully creating these kind of rails against it. So what I'm looking at right now in AI, I mean, technology speeds up, and so it's been fast in the past, and now it's really moving quickly. And these companies that are doing AI, looking for contracts with government or with school systems or with hospitals or whatever, their incentive is to be the first out with a new system. It's competitive. It's about, and particularly in the early stages of it, at some point it'll get monopolized, but right now there's a lot of players, and they're all interested in having their system bought and making stuff happen. How successful do you think we can be in actually bringing this under any kind of control, given the huge incentives for profit maximization of these companies trying to get their AI model out there and sold to a bunch of people?
Voice was kind of.
I'm going to repeat back the question because it was a little hard to hear on our end. But I think I heard it. I think it was a good question, which is basically, and I share your skepticism, expressing skepticism that government can actually regulate these processes that are basically governed by a competitive motive to sort of monopolize the marketplace as fast as possible. And given how fast that can move, it seems very difficult that a government, given the history of, for instance, for trying to regulate Facebook, could actually move the needle in terms of regulating these very fast-moving, profit-driven systems.
No, definitely. That's why I'm a believer that both in policy level and also in technical level, companies, they have a role to reduce the harm that they might cause. For example, in the context of deep fakes, if you have been following news about what companies are doing, they are all one after another. They're pledging to authentication standard. It's called C2PA, that they try to put watermarks or label or collect some metadata about images that they have been created by deepfakes. Again, if you search in the internet how to remove watermarks from deepfakes video, you can find other tools that they try to remove that watermarks. But it's kind of like a cat and mouse game, that is just like companies, they try to provide their own safeguards and measures because technically they are more advanced than governments. They are more capable than governments in finding measures or safeguards, both in technical and policy level. But there are also other tools that they try to kind of diminish what they did. So I personally believe, or in the context of child sexual abuse material, there was a coalition of companies that they tried to develop a technology that is called photo DNA, that when you see the photo on the internet, they give a fingerprint to it. It's just digital fingerprint. And when one company, let's say Microsoft or Meta, they take down that content as a child sexual abuse material, then it goes to the repository. That digital fingerprint goes to the repository that all companies, they share with each other. So Google can also take down that image. Like, it's just like it's kind of like a coalition between companies and technologists. They come up with different methods to address this issue. So it's not only governments, they cannot have any like effective safeguards if companies, they don't come up with their own safeguards, both in technical level and policy level.
Well, the other thing I want to point out that hasn't come up is the importance of open source AI models, basically ones that are not governed by the profit motive, that are not owned by a corporation, that are kind of a collective public endeavor by groups of people. Those are actually kind of prominent. There is a huge group of people working on open source AI models that are idealistically motivated, actually. And I think they really have a point because, again, to go back to the history of printing, which I think is one of the best analogies, I do a lot of work with sources printed in early modern, meaning 17th century, 18th century Spain and Portugal and France. And in all of those countries, you had an Inquisition censor, especially in 17th century Spain and Portugal, who was approving whether or not a book should be printed. And there was only a few printing presses. You actually had to be on the side of the Inquisition to get your voice out there in print. And that's kind of a risk we run especially if we're thinking in terms of government partnerships, if it's only with one company like Google or Microsoft, it gives a huge amount of significance to that company. Whereas if we have an open source model, which is just kind of proliferating freely on the internet, on the one hand, that's kind of scary because it's a bit anarchic and a little bit, it's very hard to control. But the model that we get from the printing press is that it didn't actually become a democratizing force in society until individual people could set up their own printing press and print whatever they wanted. That's freedom of speech, freedom of expression was codified via printed texts in the 18th century. That's like kind of how the concept of human rights actually began, was non-censored, independently printed material. And so I think that's a very good analogy today for AI systems. I agree with the premise of the question. I'm skeptical that they can be censored or really strongly regulated in any way. So I think the alternative is to embrace a model of having many, many participants in that process and not just letting single or a handful of corporations control it.
It's very true. Just like to add on about, we in the United States, we have Freedom of Information Act, FOIA. We have access, if you go to a federal database, procurement database, you can see that the companies that they were granted a certain kind of award. So one of our project is just to look through all these contracts and procurement information that governments, they provide on their websites and try to understand what are the companies that are involved, why there is a monopoly of like certain companies for certain selling certain tool. And so that's a good thing about having this kinds of like open data system. Unfortunately for our city and county, we don't have that much information about procurement and what are some of the companies that are involved. Maybe this is something that we can ask our council members and representatives to work more on their open data system. Because then that will be a website that we as researchers, civil society organization, we can go into and just like look at that. Or what are the companies? Why only OpenAI is granted for all departments in the city? So yeah, that's something that I think our city can work on their open data system.
Do we have any questions on Zoom?
I have a question.
Oh, back to back. Okay, great.
I was curious about your comment about confidentiality clauses in your contracts, or in any contract precludes you from getting information on how they're using and how the data is. And I was thinking of flipping it around, saying, as an attorney, I work as a government attorney, most of these companies will shove a contract at you and put that confidentiality clause there. And most of us don't, I'm retired, but most of us don't have training enough to know how to push back at them. And I would think it would be really useful for you and the people who are coming from your perspective to try to make these contracts and make these AI more open, to give guidance to these government attorneys on how to push back, what exceptions to put in those confidentiality clauses. And quite frankly, there's the Association of League of Cities, there's the counties, there's state government law, at least the lawyers, they get together and they talk about things. And technology is right now one of the required topics for continuing education for lawyers in California. So there's a great opportunity there to get in front of the people who draft these contracts on behalf of government agencies and their staff to understand how they can push back or limit the confidentiality protections that they put in there, and yet still allow the public to be protected and know how that data is being used. And I just wanted to, just suggest that to you and your colleagues, because I don't know any government attorney that wants to screw the public on this kind of issue. So if you give them the tools and get in front of, local county council, local city attorneys, I think they will try to use it. That's just my.
Thank you so much for the great idea. That's very much on point with the work that we are doing with the organization called American Association of Advancement of Science. Recently, we got a grant from Rose Foundation about, in fact, California consumer privacy. And we are developing best practices for city staff members that when they want, they really think that they need a certain AI to facilitate their work in the different agencies and departments. What are some of the questions that they have to ask during the interview question? What are some of the questions that they should put into request for proposal from companies? Because when you go to the business portal and business, there is a kind of request for proposal from business, and then they apply, and then city staff members, they try to go through the application and they ask some questions. So what are some of those interview questions that they can ask? And then another level is like, okay, now these are the clauses that these are some of the templates that of contracts that maybe these kinds of clauses they should be in the contract. So this is something that we are trying to do that with American Association of Advancement of Science. We recently got this grant to work on that. And I'm the reason that I looked at Santa Cruz, I actively look into Santa Cruz County and city and see their open data system. I was trying to gain access to some kinds of contracts, but I saw that it's not available, or some of the companies that they work, some of them, they're not available. It's not easy to find this kinds of information. But but this is part of our work to find these kinds of contracts and then see, okay, these are the gaps. These are the information that should exist in the contract. Hey, city council members, hey, procurement officers, hey, IT department who are going to probably be part of this interview committee from companies. You have to ask these types of questions from company or vendors. And also there are some better examples, like San Jose, for example, they have fact sheet for the city staff members or procurement officers in cities to go through that when they want to interact with vendors, and they ask certain questions from them. So our city can also have certain, like the similar fact sheet or examples or checklists that the other cities they have. So thank you so much. That's our kind of like work, that to look into these better practices and try to bring that in our city and in our county. Hopefully, the project is going to take about 1 to 1.5 years to sort out all the better practices, to look into other contracts, to interview other groups and see what are some of the harms. And hopefully in 1.5 years, we will have some kinds of information or educational material for our city staff members.
Thank you. I think we have another question here.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
My question is AI capable to simultaneously check whether it's a fact or not? I fact checking immediately. Yeah. And if that's the case, then at least I would see something on the screen it's not a fact, it's an opinion. Is that possible? No.
So the question is
that one as an historian. The annoying answer, but it's the one that I actually believe, is that it's effectively impossible to make any factual claim about something that it doesn't have to do with mathematics, let's say. what I mean by that is that one of the main lessons of history is that all historical facts are really just probabilities. It's a 99.9% chance that we interpreted something correctly based on incomplete sources. And that's true of political facts too. I mean, we're relying on secondhand information constantly. And so one of the things I try to teach my students is that I do believe in historical like reality. Like I'm not a postmodernist in that way. The past existed and we can learn things about it, but we always have to have a radical skepticism and an open mind about the nature of the sources we rely upon. You know, there have been cases where famous sources were in fact fabricated, and were found to be false or crucially different or in certain ways that actually change interpretations. And sometimes it's not even intentionally being misleading. It's just that subsequently different generations put different weight on events. They see things differently. If this was Santa Cruz in the 1950s, we would have a different take on certain political events in the past, like the Reconstruction era after the Civil War. You know, the way history teachers taught that era has changed radically in living generation, you know? And that's true of every kind of fact you encounter in the world. And so, no, I don't think AI has any ability to instantaneously or after the fact check in a perfect way that would be useful, because I don't think humans necessarily do either. I think the main thing is to have a human ability to have your own sense of what matches your view of reality, your own sense of trusted sources, and that hopefully those are backed up on some firm ground. But I would be very wary of any AI tool that claims to be fact-checking, because I'm also skeptical of humans who claim to be 100% accurate, right? And my experiences with AI is that it's far less accurate than a professional human. Crucially, professional humans take a long time to make factual claims. So again, I don't believe that factual claims are impossible, but I believe that I trust them more if it's the product of someone spending 5 years in an archive, as opposed to just a knee-jerk reaction about that sounds true or that doesn't sound true. And I'm pretty sure that AI in our lifetime will not be able to replicate that level of human awareness of the evidentiary record. That said, I mean, court cases, I think lawyers are one of the earliest adopters of AI that I know of. And there is something to be said for its ability to have instantaneous recall of like, here are the 222 relevant court cases on this issue, and then to actually just pull out relevant quotes. So it definitely will change the way we talk about certain things like legal matters. But there always needs to be a human involved. I'm pretty sure Roy's going to say the same thing.
I want to say one thing. I am more optimistic than you. It's for this question, in fact. So if you look at social media companies, the way that they were moderating content and they were trying to fact check, they were relying so much on human content moderators. And there are some issues with, of course, human content moderation, and how many people they can moderate content, how quickly they can be they are able to moderate content. So social media platforms, they're relying so much on AI itself to moderate content and understand that, okay, this is a fact, this is a bad election, this is a false information, disinformation. So they're relying so much on that. And from technical standpoint, the way that they do that, they try to gain so much information from that piece of post that you, or image or text that you post on your social media platform, and they try to collect information that it's called metadata. And the metadata has information about when it was posted, what was the origin of the first person who posted this image or this text, how many times has it been changed, how many times has it been reposted or commented, who are the people, who are the users that they try to post that, are they call it authentic user or inauthentic user. In 2000, like in previous, I think 2016 was the time that we heard a lot about inauthentic users, especially from Russia and China, that they were trying to meddle with election. So they were trying to understand who are the authentic users, who are not authentic users, and they gained that information. And as Ben mentioned, for a human moderators to collect all this information, they process it, it takes forever, and the election is over, and maybe the term is even over. But for AI, it's like, and with the computation power that it's in place, they immediately, they can look into this metadata and say that this is labeled as a misinformation, disinformation. So many of you might have seen on social media posts that it says that high probability of disinformation and misinformation. And sometimes they take it down at they say, and then they ban the user who posts so many of these types of content. So I can say that it's becoming faster with with AI. The information that companies they collect, and they try to gain insight based on the information or metadata that they collect, and they gain insight, is becoming more advanced and quicker, that maybe close to real time they can say close, I'm just saying close, and maybe 90% accurate, they can say this post is disinformation, or this post should be taken down, or it's deep fake, or it's just a content that it's not factual.
But I think it should be automated without a human making the
yes,
final say.
exactly.
I think
That's
a human
the
should be
thing that
involved.
we say there should be still content moderator. That doesn't mean that companies, they have to say all content moderators are now lay off. We don't need you. And now it's just AI replicated you. It's just like, we don't need you. No, there should be some kinds of oversight. How this oversight works, it's just something that's something that we think about that. And I know that content moderators themselves, they use AI for reviewing, for going through review reports, because again, on social media platforms, you can go and say that I think this information is wrong. I think this is harassment, or this information should be taken down, and then you write a report. And then again, content moderators, how they go through the report, it's something that I know that they also use AI for reviewing, for like making their own review faster. So it's just kind of like a human AI augmentation of the process that makes the process kind of like more accurate and faster.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions online?
No.
No, we don't.
We have time for one more question.
One more question coming at you.
Peter, you have a question? No
I
speakers,
do.
just a question. One question.
Why not? That's it.
Personally, I feel overwhelmed by the amount of information just given me. It's not easy for me to digest and figure out what you've said. I have a simple question. Coming from sort of an idiot's point of view, when Trump, for example, is speaking and stating blatant lies, which are simply counterfactual, can there not be something produced by AI that does, as Gunther said, have a statement next to it saying this is not true? Can we boil it down to something that simple?
I'm going to repeat the question because it was a little hard to hear. I heard it, I think, accurately. So it was basically asking, let's say Trump is being broadcast on TV. Could there be some real-time AI mechanism that would just, whenever he said something that was obviously untrue, which happens very often, and sometimes is easily provably false, could it just like show that on the screen, or could it alert people to that?
His own talk, or
Yeah, like a statement he makes.
Just
Yeah.
his own statement.
Yeah.
Or if
could it in
is
real time
deepfake?
give no, not deepfake. Could it give corrections to misinformation?
Again, not necessarily. I don't think real time that can happen, because it needs some time for processing, but it can reduce the time, and it helps the journalist to immediately transcribe it, check it with factual sources, and say that, okay, this part of the information was wrong, this part was not wrong. And it can be a few, maybe seconds, with the help of AI, as opposed to let's journalists go back and check and transcribe it and try to understand if it's right or wrong. And in terms of deep fakes, if you want to know that you see like a video and say that if Trump or not, then companies, yes, they have been working on that in terms of putting some kinds of information, say this is deep fake, this is not deep fake. And again, there are tools that erode kind of like companies' efforts in showing that this is not right, this is not deep fake, or it is deep fakes. But companies, they are claiming that they have this ability to make it accurate above 90% and making it real time.
Could I just go back to what Gail said, though, which is the importance of civic society education for young people. I mean, I don't think any technology we invent necessarily would have anything to do with preventing Trump from getting reelected or spreading falsehoods. That's just the nature of the political society we're living in, that's resonating. We have to be honest with that. And people who are bad faith actors who spread misinformation have historically been very successful politically. That's just a fact of human nature. It's not something we can fix with the new shiny technology. The only real way we can address that issue is not real time, flashing on the screen, this is false, but teaching young people and teaching people in college to create a new generation of people who are able to themselves notice that falsehood, right? I'm giving a standard answer that an educator would give. I think all of my colleagues would say the same thing. The fix is not some new technology, it's just better education. I know that sounds maybe boring, but I really think that's all that I can think of that would address this issue, because it's human nature, unfortunately, to go for demagogues. Again, Socrates could have told you that. Socrates spent a lot of time arguing with Trumpian type of people. And
Stalin image when he took out
Stalin, the famous photoshopped image from Soviet Russia where they just removed someone who had been, erased from history. It's not new, and really the only way to get around it is better education for young people, and crucially encouraging multiple perspectives and multiple points of view, which is something that I personally worry about with AI, unless we're able to embrace multiple different modalities for AI in society and not just see it as one thing.
Great. Thank you so much. This has been so informative today. We've learned so much, and I think you've given us a much broader perspective on all the different ways to think about AI. So I want to, on behalf of the Democratic Women's Club, thank you so very much. Any other questions? So I think that's going to be it for today. I know that you have a lot going on. Thank you so very much. And thanks to everybody on Zoom and everybody in the room as well. Have a great afternoon. Thanks again. It's fantastic. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I have one more thing I would ask as a favor. Please